when whippoorwill call, and evening is nigh, I hurry to my blue heaven.
G'day guys, welcome to another edition of My Blue Heaven. Now usually on a Monday I'd be putting together a video on a review of the weekend's game, which would have been yesterday's game against the Western Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium. But such is the situation we're in at the moment. We're all trying to find a little bit to talk about in regards to football. I'm sure everyone's missing it out there, including myself. Hope you enjoyed my last video on Carlton's best team since 1979. A little bit of controversy, a little bit of feedback, which is always great. It's all about opinion. Hope you enjoyed that one. So I'm going to continue that theme in regards to putting teams together. So this one, I'm going to go right back to 1970, so the last 50 years. I'm going to call it Carlton Cult Figures. Not so much Carlton Cult Heroes, but Cult Figures. That's not to say that some of these players in this team weren't greats of our football club, but there's some lesser likes I'm going to throw in there right back from 1970 to 2020. So a quick criteria for this. Look, as I said, I'm going to stay away from just picking a team of champions, you know, really, really well-known players. I suppose when we talk about a cult figure, there's a couple of things we take in our mind: what the player looks like, whether it's their hair or the build, the way they move on the football field in regards to demeanour, their personality, their traits in regards to their running and their kicking, and the crowd reaction, a player that's able to have a positive impact, maybe even sometimes a negative impact on their supportive base. And I think all of these players, in some respect as well, and this is my final piece of criteria, is they've all stood the test of time, even back 50 years ago. And even the players that I've picked I say the last 10 years, I think in 50 years' time we'll remember them as well. So let's get this started. Once again, I would love your feedback. I've gone through the archives. I'm a little bit older than some of you out there. So I'm going to go right back to when I was a really young kid. And some of these I watched, obviously watching some highlights or old DVDs of old grand finals as well. A lot of apologies as well. I'm not going to go through the apologies, the players I picked out, because I want you to provide me your cult figures from the Carlton Football Club over the years in the section below. So I'm going to start from the back line. Tom Alvin in the back pocket. Now, Tom came from Bairnsdale, which was the Bulldogs, Footscray zone in that time, and he came with the flowing long hair with the fringe at the front, used to wear a ponytail. And he was a real eye-catcher in regards and a fan favourite. Tom Alvin played in the 1987 Premiership for us, and played over 200 games. As a great player and was a real cult figure in regards to the way he played his football. He was hard and tough, but he had a real look about him, didn't he, with that long flowing locks. And I remember one time he actually got tackled by his hair, which was one of the real, not so much a highlight of his career, but one of the things I remember about Tommy Alvin. At full back, Matthew Watson. Big head Matthew Watson, and we all remember Matthew Watson, a first round draft pick for us back in around about 2010-11. Only played there 4 or 5 years, 23 games he played, Matthew Watson. I think he'd be remembered fondly. Quiet sort of kid, but just his build, and he was a real cult figure with his big booming left foot. So at full back I have Matthew Watson. I don't think Matthew's probably going to feature any sort of best of Carlton teams in the future, but he's certainly one of the Carlton cult figures over the last 50 years. In the other back pocket, I've got Ange Christo with the long sleeves, the number 39 Ange. And who could forget Ange's relationship with his great mate, Anthony Koutafiti? He's a real Carlton favourite amongst the supporter base. And he had the catch cry of that huge, big woof every time he kicked the football, Ange Christo, and we loved the way he went about his football, played in that famous 1995 grand final. Across the halfback flank, look, one of the great champions of the football club. As I said before, I wanted to stay away picking, just sort of really well-known champion players, but who could go past Bruce Doull? The number 11, the flying doormat, as he was nicknamed by Lou Richards, the headband, the fact that he was so quiet and almost aloof and shy, but such a wonderful footballer. And everyone, even opposition supporters, know who Bruce Doull is, and he is one of the great cult figures of our football club. At centre half back, two-time premiership player in 1981 and 1982 and former St Kilda defender Val Wolf Perovic. Now, if we thought Ange Christo had that catch cry when he kicked the ball, Val Perovic was the first. Every time he got that ball in the back half, he would go bang with that right foot. Never really looked where he was kicking it, but he used to kick very long, was a great defender. And he was a real cult figure in the way he looked. He had the moustache. He had a bit of a reputation off the field as well as being a really big drinker and a bit of a party animal. And a great bloke is Val Perovic at centre half back. A little bit of a one here that you might know at halfback flank is John Gould, 1968 and 1970 premiership player. Dashing halfback flanker. If you've ever watched the 1970 grand final, that famous grand final, John Gould, he stands out. He had the sort of longish hair. He was very flamboyant. He was nicknamed by Lou Richards, who seemed to nickname a lot of players. He called John Gould Mr. Flamboyant, and he was known around the club as Ragsy. He was a pretty of a socialite off the field. He was involved in women's fashion, was John Gould. So he sits comfortably across the half-back flank. Let's go to the centre line. Who could forget Vinny Cottogio on the wing, the number 4 with the big bouffant, the big afro. Not only did he have the big afro, but he had that. He was really fast, and he stood out. Vinny Cottogio, and he's remembered fondly. Little Vinny played in the losing 1973 premiership team and he played around about 80 odd games, and I think he left the club. I think he may have gone to the Bulldogs possibly, maybe Melbourne. He ended up going to Vinny Cottogio, but he was a real fan favourite. Anthony Koutafidis, you couldn't have a cult figure team without the big Kouta, the Adonis, the build, the way he used to pick the ball up with one hand. He was admired by opposition supporters. He's continued to be admired. Some of his individual performance takes on cult-like status. The 99 prelim final and that 1996 game against the West Coast Eagles at Princes Park when he took 18 marks, and the day he took on Wayne Carey, probably the best player of all time, and took him to the cleaners at Princes Park against North Melbourne. So he starts in the centre, the big Kouta. On the other wing, the hyphen, David Rhys-Jones. Now, a lot of people said, why didn't you put David Rhys-Jones in your best team of the last 40 years? So he comes into my cult figure team, came across from Sydney Swans. He looked the part, that loping sort of action, and one of the more famous performances by any individual for a Carlton team was when he took on Dermot Brereton in the 87 grand final. It's sort of folklore stuff, and went from a forward and a winger to centre half back and won the Norm Smith medal. And the amount of times that Reece was reported as well is real cult-like status. So he fits onto the wing. Cross half forward, Paul Molly Meldrum, 1987 premiership player, the same team as David Rhys-Jones. Molly, once again, the myth, the legend. Molly played over 200 games, was a great, skillful footballer, but he had that reputation as he just walked off the street, turned up at pre-season training. Next thing you know, he's played 100 games for the football club. But he looked the part, looked a little bit like Billy Idol. So he's a bit of a rock star, Paul Meldrum, but a fabulous footballer. So he starts on the wing. Half-forward flank. Across half-forward flank. Centre half-forward, Earl Duke Spalding. Just such a cult figure for the Carlton Football Club. Who would forget that bump on Guy McKenna over at Subiaco in 95, where he ironed him out in that famous victory. Workhorse. We loved him. We loved the way he played his football when he came across from Melbourne. It was one of the best recruits we've ever picked up. And he was a real favourite, and he continues to be a bit of a legend around the football club in regards to what he was able to do with, I wouldn't say a lot of ability, but just a great work ethic and a great team player. Another star of the Carlton fraternity is Peter Bazzusto. I mean, bums on seats, 3 years at the football club, only played the 60-odd games, but everything he did, whether it was goal of the year, mark of the year, he could flick the switch and ignite the team. He could turn a game on its head, and then he could be really inconsistent and not get a kick. But the way he held himself, he loved to, he enjoyed football, and it just a fabulous crowd favourite. So Peter Bazzusto on the half-forward flank. In the forward pocket, he missed out in my last 40 years, Jezza, which was a little bit controversial. But look, I didn't see the best of Jezza, but he's probably one of the more well-known players in the history of VFL/AFL football. Who can forget the mark, the nickname Jezza, the mustaka, his flamboyancy, such a cult figure of the Carlton Football Club. The Fev at full forward, once again, bums on seats, a little bit like Buzzer, but he had that real vulnerable side to him as well, but a real likeable side to Fev. He'd go through different phases, whether it was the dreadlock hair. He could play really poorly, but the next game, kick 8 goals and win a game off his own boot. And he was flamboyant, and he was enigmatic, and such a cult figure was Brendan Favola. We go to the forward pocket. So these are all little stars, but you can't not have them in the team. And Eddie Betts is another one. I don't think there's been a bigger crowd favourite in my time of watching Carlton than little Eddie Betts. Every time he'd get the ball, the crowd, would chant Eddie, Eddie. And even when he went to the Crows, it was similar. Unbelievable figure in both the Carlton and Adelaide football clubs is Eddie Betts as a Carlton cult figure. In the ruck, could have gone to Warren Jones, a big wow, but I've gone with Peter Percy Jones. Not about a really, really good tap ruckman, Percy Jones, and I think he played in 3 premierships, 68, 70 and 72. And no, he actually played in 4 because he played in 79 as well. But if you've seen some highlights of Percy, check them out on YouTube because he was such a larrikin and such a likeable person. Owned a pub, was a publican, was larger than life off the field as well. So Peter Percy Jones, he'd do some of the most remarkable things on the football field in regards to looking a little bit stupid as well, but he could play and was a great character. Fraser Dog Brown as Ruck Rover, from the hair to what he did in the 99 prelim where he tackled Wallace and won us the game. One of the biggest highlights ever in the history of the Carlton, individual highlights in the history of the Carlton Football Club, and it was more than just that. It was the way he played. He was a crowd favourite because he was hard, he was tough, but he was skillful. And every time you read forums, you always go back to Fraser Brown, and he was what he was able to do as a footballer. He really did look the part. And his apprentice, a little bit of an unknown one here, but came across from Frankston in the draft, I think in the early 2000s or even the late 90s, was Darren Pup Hume. Now, it was called Pup because he tagged along Fraser Brown when he first arrived at the club. So Brownie was known as Dog and Hume was known as Pup. He was small, he was hard, he was likeable, he could go forward and kick a goal. I remember him fondly, Darren Hume, as a real cult figure around the football club and ended up playing 100 games as well. On the interchange bench, 4 goals after half-time in the 1970 grand final. He virtually started the game on the Pine, played the grand final, and then we basically never saw him again. That's Teddy Hopkins. I mean, just what a legend, what a cult figure. And a little bit of a strange unit as well, a little bit like John Gould in regards to just being a little bit different off the field. And not many people know that he was the founder of Champion Data Stats, Teddy Hopkins on the Pine. Luke Rhino Sullivan, another player on the Pine. Took him an eternity, the big Rhino, to play 50 games for the football club. It was a great club, and I think he won the award on about 3 times. He was the way he played, bustling, he had power, he had those trunk-like thighs. He had a booming left foot, but was crippled by injuries. But Luke Rhino O'Sullivan starts in the Pine in my Carlton figure team. One of my favourites, and a modern favourite, slips onto the Pine as well, is Dennis Armfield. It was part of the Judd deal. It was the steak knives in the Judd deal. Played some great football, but just his running, he was exciting, but he could do the ridiculously stupid as well. Kick the ball out in the full or turn it over. We'll give a stupid free kick away. But, that game against Geelong where he took the Cats on and kicked 3 or 4 goals, I think it was a real highlight of his career, and a great, likeable player off the field, and a real cult figure was Dennis Armfield. Now, a colleague of mine, a commentator, Tom King, actually named him Dennis with a 1970s name, Armfield, and I think that sums him up perfectly, Dennis Armfield. Another modern player from around about 2012, 10 to 12, Nick Duigan. And the myth of Nick Duigan, obviously that game against Richmond in 2013, where he was a late inclusion because Brock McLean was a late out, and Nick Duigan came in and went forward and kicked 4 goals. And I know that still haunts Richmond supporters when you mention the name of Nick Duigan. Came across from South Australia as a mature age recruit. It was a real find in his first year, but then started to struggle. But I think as a cult figure now, that performance alone puts him right at the top of the tree in regards to being such a cult figure of the football club. Let's go to some emergencies. Big Satanta O'Halpin. I remember one of his first games at Marvel Stadium, or the old Docklands, or Etihad, whatever it was called back then when he first started. And I think he was like a crazy horse. He'd get the ball in the back line, he'd take the players on, he'd be bouncing at the ball, be going over his head, but he was so exciting. Big Santana. Who would forget in that intra-club practice game where he kicked Cameron Cloak up the arse, and it was all over the TV. And yeah, look, such a likeable character, Big Satanta. Could play a little bit, played some really good football, but just the fact that he was from Ireland and he looked a little bit different. He was sort of gangly. But could be brilliant. Certainly puts him in that cult figure sort of bracket. One that sort of came in, I sort of threw this one back and forward, but I'm going to pop him in because his old man missed out on my last 40 years best team, which he could have got in, was Jimmy Buckley. I'm going to throw Dylan Buckley in there as a cult figure, and this probably goes more along the lines of the stuff he's doing post-football, although when he was playing at Carlton, he started to do that sort of podcast stuff and was a real character around the football club. But he's become a real sort of, just a real figure in regards to him being, right up there, funny, cheeky. And he played his football like that as well. So Dylan Buckley is an emergency. A little bit of a controversial one here, but I think most of you will probably agree that I had to chuck in Josh Bootsma as my other emergency, only because if you remember Josh Bootsma's first game, I think it was against GWS at Etihad Stadium. I've never seen, he came up off the bench, I've never seen a crowd react to a first gamer every time he got the ball, and he kept getting it. Then a Carlton crowd react to an individual in Josh Bootsma. And he's a player. Every time something's mentioned, there's a photo of Josh Bootsma put up there. And he is, from the hair to the fact that he's so skinny, and unfortunately left the club under sort of unsavoury circumstances, but we'll move on from that. And I've got a coach, and I've gone David T. I just think he's perfect as a cult figure. I think what happened last year, at the back end of last year when he took over from Bolts, and standing ovation at the past players, the T train, all that sort of stuff puts him right up there. And if he's able to sort of get us back up there into finals contention and then hopefully win our 17th premiership, he will become a legend of the Carlton Football Club. So there's my Carlton cult figure team. What do you think, guys? Do you like it? Put down below your favourite player in terms of cult figures in the comments below. I've got a whole heap of other players here that could have made it. I'm not going to mention it because you'll probably want to mention them yourself. I'll be back again with another team over the next couple of days. If you like these videos, please give us a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you shortly.